Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life that arrive quietly on the calendar yet thunder through the soul. Days that look ordinary until you realize they are standing at the edge of everything changing. December 15th is not just a date, it is an invitation. An invitation to pause, to listen, and to recognize that something deeper has been stirring long before today arrived. We often believe transformation announces itself with noise and certainty, but more often it begins as a whisper, a nudge within the heart that says, this is the moment. A moment when what you've been carrying no longer fits who you are becoming. A moment when faith rises above fear and you sense that your life is not slough shy, not accidental, but guided with purpose. December 15th stands as a mirror, reflecting not only where you have been, but who you are called to be. It reminds us that change does not require permission from the past. It requires trust. Trust that even now, especially now, there is a divine order at work, aligning lessons, losses, and hopes into something meaningful. What once felt like delay begins to look like preparation. Faith teaches us that breakthroughs are rarely loud. They are revealed when we choose awareness over doubt and courage over comfort. When we stop resisting the present and start cooperating with it, the ordinary becomes sacred. Today is not about forcing a new future, but awakening to the one already unfolding. This is the game changer, not because the world suddenly shifts, but because you do. Your perception widens, your heart steadies, and you realize that grace has been walking beside you all along, patiently waiting for you to notice that this day, this breath, this decision is the turning point. December 15th appears on the calendar like any other date, quiet, unannounced, easily overlooked, yet beneath its ordinary surface, there is a subtle gravity that pulls at awareness. A silent turning point never demands attention, it waits for recognition. It does not arrive with fireworks or certainty, but with a feeling that something has shifted before the mind can explain it. Life often moves this way, disguising its most important moments as routine, inviting only those who are paying attention to notice that a threshold has been crossed. This day does not ask you to become someone new. It asks you to see what has already been changing within you. Slowly, patiently, without applause. A silent turning point is powerful because it does not force transformation. It reveals it. It allows you to look back and realize that the confusion, the delays, the unanswered prayers were not interruptions, but preparations. What felt like standing still was actually a deep internal movement, shaping perspective, strengthening faith, refining intention. December 15th is not loud because real change rarely is. It unfolds in awareness in the moment you realize you are no longer reacting the same way, no longer fearing what once controlled you, no longer questioning your worth in the same voice. There's something sacred about a turning point that does not announce itself. It honors free will. It waits until you are ready to see it. Faith works like this too, quietly arranging understanding beneath the surface while the outer world appears unchanged. On a day like this, nothing dramatic needs to happen for everything to be different. A single realization, a shift in how you interpret your circumstances can change the entire direction of your life without altering a single external detail. December 15th stands as a reminder that destiny does not always come rushing toward you. Sometimes it rises gently from within. The mind wants evidence, timelines, guarantees, but the soul recognizes alignment without explanation. You may not know exactly what is changing, only that you cannot return to the way you were before this awareness appeared. That is the nature of a true turning point. It closes a door silently, not with resistance, but with clarity. Faith deepens here, not as belief in a distant outcome, but as trust in the present moment. Trust that you are being guided even when the path feels unclear. Trust that what is leaving your life is making room for something more aligned. A silent turning point does not rush you forward, it grounds you, reminding you that growth is happening even when progress cannot be measured. On December 15th, the invitation is not to act impulsively, but to observe honestly, to notice how your thoughts have softened, how your fears no longer feel absolute, how hope has begun to feel natural rather than forced. This is how life signals a change in direction, not by shouting, but by easing the struggle. You realize that what once felt heavy is losing its grip, that resistance is fading into acceptance, and acceptance into quiet confidence. A turning point like this is deeply personal. Others may not see it. They may expect visible results, immediate proof, dramatic announcements. But the most meaningful shifts occur privately between you and the awareness that something within you has settled into truth. December 15th is not about becoming different overnight, but about recognizing that. The battle you thought you were fighting has already changed form, that you are standing on new ground without having noticed the exact moment your feet arrived there, and that from this place forward, your choices, your faith, and your understanding begin to move in a direction that no longer requires force, only presence, attention, and a willingness to walk forward, knowing that the silence itself is confirmation that something real has already begun. Ordinary moments often pass unnoticed because the mind is trained to look for significance in extremes, in dramatic shifts, in visible rewards. Yet divine purpose rarely announces itself through spectacle. It settles quietly into daily life, hidden inside routine conversations, repeated struggles, and familiar surroundings. What appears ordinary is not empty. It is layered with meaning, waiting to be recognized. Purpose does not interrupt life from the outside. It unfolds from within the moment as it is, exactly where you are. There is a subtle intelligence moving through everyday experience, arranging lessons in the most unassuming forms. A delay becomes patience, a disappointment becomes discernment, a silence becomes guidance. Faith begins to deepen when you realize that nothing is wasted, that even the moments you once dismissed as insignificant were shaping your understanding in ways you could not measure at the time. The divine does not require special conditions to operate. It works through what already exists, through the ordinary rhythm of breath, thought, and choice. When purpose is hidden in ordinary moments, it teaches humility. It dissolves the idea that meaning exists somewhere else, in a future version of life that finally makes sense. Instead, it invites awareness into the present, asking you to pay attention to what is already speaking. The everyday becomes a classroom, and each experience, pleasant, uncomfortable, carries instruction. Faith is no longer something you reach for only in crisis. It becomes a quiet trust woven into how you interpret your day. Ordinary moments also test perception. Two people can live through the same circumstances, yet one feels trapped while the other feels guided. The difference is not circumstance, but awareness. When you begin to sense divine purpose in simple experiences, frustration gives way to curiosity. Instead of asking why something is happening, you begin to ask what it is teaching. This shift changes how life feels, even before it changes how life looks. Purpose hidden in the ordinary removes the pressure to constantly search for something more. It softens restlessness by revealing that growth is already happening. You realize that you are not behind, not late, not missing your moment. The moment has been walking with you all along, disguised as repetition, as waiting, as unfinished answers. Faith grows steadier here, no longer dependent on external confirmation, but anchored in the understanding that guidance is present even when outcomes are unclear. There is a quiet sacredness in ordinary moments because they demand honesty. There is no performance, no audience, no recognition. Just you, your awareness, and the choice of how you respond. In these moments, character is formed, patience is strengthened, and trust is refined. What you do with the ordinary determines how you handle the extraordinary when it arrives. When divine purpose is recognized in everyday life, gratitude replaces urgency. You stop rushing past meaning in search of something more impressive. You begin to see that the very things you once tried to escape were shaping resilience, clarity, and depth. Even pain takes on a different texture, no longer meaningless, but part of a larger movement toward understanding. Ordinary moments carrying divine purpose remind you that life is not waiting to begin. It is already in motion, already aligned, already teaching. The path does not suddenly appear at a dramatic crossroads. It reveals itself step by step through attention, trust, and willingness to see the sacred woven into the simple. Every day becomes a quiet conversation between awareness and faith, where nothing is random, nothing is overlooked, and every small experience carries the weight of intention, guiding you gently forward without force, without urgency, and without the need for dramatic signs to confirm that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Inner change always begins before the world reflects it back to you. Long before circumstances shift, something subtle starts rearranging within awareness, altering how you see, how you listen, how you interpret what happens around you. Most people overlook this phase because it feels quiet and uncertain, yet it is the most decisive part of transformation. Nothing external can change in a lasting way until perception itself evolves. Life waits for that internal alignment before allowing the outer world to respond. At first, inner change is barely noticeable. It shows up as a pause where there used to be reaction, a question where there used to be assumption, a calm where there used to be resistance. These are not dramatic signs, but they are powerful. They signal that awareness is loosening its grip on old patterns. Faith deepens here, not through certainty, but through trust in what cannot yet be seen. You begin to sense that something is shifting, even if you cannot explain it or prove it. The mind often resists this stage because it craves evidence. It wants confirmation in results and recognition in visible progress. Yet inner change requires patience because it is a reorientation of consciousness, not a quick adjustment of behavior. It is the difference between forcing a new habit and becoming a new way of seeing. When perception changes, behavior follows naturally, without strain. This is why inner change feels less like effort and more like release. Awakening to inner change requires honesty. It asks you to notice where your reactions have softened, where your fears have lost authority, where your self-talk has grown quieter and kinder. These shifts are not accidental. They are signs that awareness is maturing. Faith expresses itself here as willingness to let go of old narratives, even when they once felt protective. You realize that what you believed about yourself, about others, about life was never fixed, only familiar. As inner change unfolds, the outer world may appear unchanged or even resistant. This can be confusing, leading to doubt about whether anything is actually happening. But the outer world often lags behind awareness. It reflects patterns that are already dissolving internally. When you remain grounded in inner clarity, the need to control outcomes weakens. You no longer feel compelled to force change because you trust that alignment precedes manifestation. Inner change also reshapes how you relate to challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you begin to see them as feedback. Life becomes a dialogue rather than a struggle. Each experience reveals something about where awareness still holds tension or where trust can deepen. This perspective does not remove difficulty, but it removes the sense of being opposed by life itself. There is a spiritual maturity that develops when you accept that inner change is the true beginning. You stop measuring progress by external milestones alone and start recognizing subtle shifts in peace, clarity, and presence. Faith becomes less about hoping for a better future and more about cooperating with the present moment. You understand that the world cannot mirror a truth you have not yet embodied. As awareness continues to change, relationships adjust, opportunities realign, and circumstances begin to respond without force. What once felt like effort starts to feel natural. This is not because life has become easier, but because resistance has lessened. You move with events instead of against them, guided by a deeper sense of coherence. Awakening to inner change before outer change is an act of trust. It means honoring what is happening within you even when it is invisible to others. It means allowing faith to mature quietly without rushing for proof. When inner change is respected, The outer world eventually follows, not as a reward, but as a reflection of an awareness that has already shifted, an understanding that has already taken root, and a presence that no longer waits for permission from circumstances to feel aligned, grounded, and guided in the direction life is naturally moving. Fear often speaks first and loudest, presenting itself as logic, caution, or realism. It claims to protect, yet its true function is to preserve the familiar. Faith, by contrast, does not compete for volume. It waits quietly beneath the noise, steady and patient, inviting trust rather than demanding control. When faith begins to rise above fear, it is not because fear disappears, but because its authority weakens. You begin to hear another voice, calmer and more grounded, reminding you that uncertainty is not the same as danger. Fear thrives on imagined outcomes, projecting past pain into the future and calling it wisdom. It narrows perception, convincing you that survival depends on holding tightly to what you know. Faith expands perception. It does not deny risk, but it refuses to let risk define reality. Faith recognizes that growth requires movement, and movement always involves the unknown. When faith rises, it reframes. Uncertainty is possibility rather than threat. This shift does not happen through force. You cannot argue fear into silence. Fear loses power when awareness grows strong enough to observe it without obeying it. Faith enters here as presence, as the ability to remain grounded even while fear speaks. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of retreating, you listen more deeply. This pause is where faith begins to lead. Rising above fear does not mean eliminating doubt. Doubt is a natural part of human awareness. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to act without complete certainty. It is choosing alignment over reassurance. When faith guides you, you stop waiting for guarantees that never come. You begin to move based on inner clarity rather than external approval. Fear often disguises itself as self-criticism, replaying limitations and mistakes as proof of unworthiness. Faith counters this by anchoring identity in something deeper than performance or past outcomes. It reminds you that worth is inherent, not earned through perfection. As faith rises, self-trust strengthens. You become less dependent on validation and more attuned to inner guidance. When faith rises above fear, the relationship with failure changes. Failure is no longer seen as evidence of inadequacy, but as information. It becomes part of the learning process rather than a verdict on identity. Fear wants to avoid failure at all costs. Faith understands that growth cannot happen without it. This understanding softens the emotional weight of mistakes and encourages resilience. Fear isolates, convincing you that you are alone in your struggle. Faith reconnects, reminding you that you are part of something larger, something purposeful. This sense of connection does not require constant confidence. It requires trust in a process that unfolds even when understanding is incomplete. Faith allows you to walk forward without seeing the entire path. As faith continues to rise, decisions begin to feel less reactive. You stop choosing based on what you want to avoid and start choosing based on what feels aligned. Fear-driven choices shrink life. Faith-driven choices expand it. This expansion may feel uncomfortable at first, but it brings a sense of integrity that fear can never provide. Rising above fear is not a single moment of courage, but a series of quiet choices to trust again and again. Each time you choose presence over panic, openness over control, faith strengthens. It becomes less of an abstract belief and more of a lived experience. Over time, fear loses its dominance, not because it is defeated, but because it is no longer believed as the final authority. Faith becomes the lens through which uncertainty is navigated, purpose is clarified, and action is taken with calm resolve, even when the outcome remains unknown. And the path continues to unfold step by step under a guidance that does not shout, but steadies, directs, and sustains every movement forward. Letting go of the past does not begin with rejection or denial. It begins with understanding that the past no longer requires your permission to define who you are. Many people remain bound not by what happened, but by the belief that they must continually answer to it. Memories become silent authorities, shaping decisions long after their relevance has faded. Letting go is not an act of erasing history, but of releasing its control over the present. The past often presents itself as a judge, reminding you of mistakes, mischances, and versions of yourself you have outgrown. It speaks in familiar tones, convincing you that growth must be approved by what has already occurred. Yet life does not move backward for validation. It moves forward through awareness. When you stop seeking ion from the past, you begin to recognize that experience was meant to teach, not to imprison. There is a subtle fear in letting go because the past feels known. Even painful memories provide a sense of identity and predictability. Releasing them can feel like stepping into emptiness, but that emptiness is not absence. It is space for new understanding, new choices, and new expressions of self. Faith becomes essential here, not as blind optimism, but as trust that you are not losing yourself. By letting go, you are uncovering who you are becoming. The past often demands explanation. It wants you to justify why you are changing, why you no longer react the same way, why old patterns no longer fit. But growth does not require explanation. You do not owe yesterday a defense for today's clarity. When you stop negotiating with the past, energy that was once spent on regret or self-justification becomes available for presence. Letting go also changes how you interpret memory. Instead of replaying experiences as fixed truths, you begin to see them as perspectives shaped by who you were at the time. Awareness matures, and with it, interpretation evolves. What once felt like failure may now reveal resilience. What once felt like loss may now reveal redirection. The events themselves do not change, but their meaning does. Faith supports this process by grounding identity in something deeper than personal history. It reminds you that you are not the sum of your mistakes or your successes. You are a living process, continuously unfolding. When identity shifts from being past-based to presence-based, freedom emerges naturally. You respond to life as it is now, not as it once was. Releasing the need for permission from the past also softens attachment to old roles. You may notice that others still expect you to behave according to outdated versions of yourself. This can create tension, but it is a natural part of growth. Letting go means allowing misunderstanding without returning to old patterns for comfort. Faith steadies you here, reinforcing that alignment matters more than approval. As the past loosens its grip, clarity increases. Decisions become less reactive, no longer driven by the need to prove, correct, or escape what has already happened. Instead, choices are made from intention. This shift feels quieter than dramatic breakthroughs, but it is more sustainable. You begin to live from understanding rather than defense. Letting go of the past without seeking permission is not about forgetting or minimizing experience. It is about honoring it without carrying it forward unnecessarily. It is recognizing that life does not ask you to remain loyal to outdated versions of yourself. It invites you to step fully into the present, where growth is not constrained by memory, where faith supports movement without certainty, and where the future is shaped not by what has been, but by what you are willing to release, trust, and embody as you continue forward unburdened by explanations, regrets, or the need to justify your transformation to a time that is already fulfilled its purpose. Human urgency is shaped by impatience, comparison, and the need for control. It measures life by deadlines, milestones, and visible progress, assuming that delay is failure and speed is success. This mindset creates tension because it treats life as something to be managed rather than something to be understood. Divine timing moves differently. It is not concerned with haste or delay, only with alignment. When you begin trusting divine timing over human urgency, pressure softens and clarity replaces anxiety. Urgency often comes from fear of missing out or fear of falling behind. It convinces you that if things do not happen quickly, they may never happen at all. This belief narrows awareness and leads to forced decisions. Faith challenges this by offering a broader view, one that sees life as unfolding rather than racing. Divine timing does not rush because it accounts for growth that cannot be measured externally. It honors readiness, not impatience. Trusting divine timing requires surrendering the illusion of control. This can feel uncomfortable, especially when effort has been invested and results are expected. Yet control often blocks the very outcomes it seeks to secure. When urgency drives action, choices are reactive. When trust guides action, choices are intentional. Faith does not eliminate effort, but it aligns effort with understanding rather than anxiety. Divine timing often appears as delay from a human perspective. What feels like waiting is often preparation. Skills are developing, awareness is expanding, and internal alignment is taking shape. These processes cannot be rushed without compromising depth. When you trust timing, waiting becomes active rather than passive. You remain present, attentive, and engaged without demanding immediate resolution. Human urgency focuses on outcomes, while divine timing emphasizes process. Urgency asks, when will it happen? Faith asks, what is being formed? This shift changes how challenges are experienced. Instead of seeing obstacles as barriers, you begin to see them as part of refinement. Each delay carries instruction, revealing where patience, trust, or understanding can deepen. Comparison fuels urgency by making life feel like a competition. You measure progress against others and conclude that something is wrong if your path moves differently. Divine timing dissolves comparison by recognizing that each path has its own rhythm. What arrives early for one may arrive later for another, not as punishment, but as design. Faith accepts this without resentment. Trusting timing also changes the relationship with effort. You stop forcing outcomes and start cooperating with opportunities as they arise. Action becomes responsive rather than aggressive. You recognize when to move and when to pause, understanding that rest and reflection are not signs of laziness, but components of wisdom. Divine timing values balance over burnout. As trust deepens, anxiety loses its grip. The need to constantly evaluate progress weakens. You no longer feel compelled to rush decisions or settle for misaligned choices simply to relieve pressure. Faith steadies the nervous system, allowing intuition to become clearer. You begin to sense when something is ready and when it is not, without relying on rigid timelines. Trusting divine timing does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means releasing desperation. You still show up, still prepare, still commit, but without the internal strain that urgency creates. Effort becomes sustainable. Hope becomes grounded rather than frantic. Over time, you may look back and realize that moments you once resented for their slowness were essential. Had things arrived sooner, they would have arrived before you were ready to receive them. Divine timing protects as much as it provides. It ensures that when something enters your life, you have the capacity to hold it with clarity and gratitude. Choosing trust over urgency is an act of faith that reshapes how life is lived. You stop battling time and start moving with it. Each step feels less pressured, more intentional. You learn to listen rather than push, to align rather than force, and to recognize that what is meant for you does not require frantic pursuit, only readiness, patience, and a willingness to let life unfold at the pace that best supports depth, understanding, and lasting fulfillment. Awareness is often mistaken for knowledge, yet they are not the same. Knowledge accumulates information, while awareness transforms how information is perceived. A true breakthrough does not occur when something new is added, but when something unnecessary is seen through. Awareness does not change the facts of life. It changes the relationship to them. In this sense, awareness is not a tool, but a shift in consciousness that quietly redefines everything it touches. Most struggles persist not because solutions are absent, but because perception is narrow. When awareness expands, What once felt complex begins to simplify. Patterns become visible. Reactions lose their urgency. You begin to notice how much of your experience is shaped not by events themselves, but by the meaning assigned to them. This recognition is subtle yet profound because it returns responsibility to perception rather than circumstance. Awareness as a breakthrough is powerful because it requires no force. It does not demand effort in the conventional sense. Instead, it asks for honesty and presence. You stop trying to fix yourself and begin observing yourself. In that observation, unconscious habits reveal themselves. Thoughts that once ran automatically are seen clearly, and in being seen, they lose control. Change happens not through struggle, but through understanding. When awareness deepens, emotional reactions soften. Not because emotions disappear, but because they are no longer mistaken for absolute truth. You feel anger without becoming anger. You experience fear without letting it define direction. This space between experience and identity is where freedom emerges. Awareness creates this space naturally, without suppression or denial. Many people search for breakthroughs in dramatic experiences, external validation, or sudden success. Yet the most enduring shifts happen quietly, in moments of recognition. You realize that you have been repeating the same pattern, asking the same question, or resisting the same feeling. This realization alone begins to dissolve the pattern. Awareness interrupts repetition by revealing it. Faith aligns naturally with awareness because both require presence. Faith is not blind belief in a future outcome. It is trust in the unfolding of the present moment. Awareness grounds this trust by keeping attention here rather than lost in regret or anticipation. When awareness is present, faith feels less like effort and more like stability. Awareness also reshapes self-identity. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts, roles, or past experiences. These are expressions moving through awareness, not definitions of it. This understanding reduces self-judgment. You stop trying to live up to an image and start responding authentically to what is happening now. This authenticity is not loud or performative. It is calm and grounded. As awareness becomes the breakthrough, decision-making changes. Choices are no longer driven by impulse or fear, but by clarity. You notice when something feels misaligned before committing to it. You sense when action is necessary and when stillness is wiser. This sensitivity is not learned through strategy, but through attention. Awareness also reveals where energy is being wasted. You see how much effort goes into resisting what already is. When resistance drops, energy becomes available for creativity, compassion, and understanding. Life feels less like a battle and more like a dialogue. Experiences are met rather than posed. The simplicity of awareness can be unsettling because it offers no dramatic story. There is no enemy to defeat, no achievement to display. Yet this simplicity is what makes it transformative. It works quietly, continuously, reshaping perception from the inside out. When awareness becomes the true breakthrough, life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes coherent. You understand why things affect you the way they do. You recognize when old patterns try to return and meet them with clarity rather than frustration. Growth becomes less about becoming more and more about seeing clearly. In this clarity, effort softens, faith stabilizes, and understanding deepens. You move through life with less urgency and more presence. Challenges are still present, but they are no longer overwhelming. They are information, guidance, invitations to deeper awareness. The breakthrough is not something you reach one day. It is something you live, moment by moment, as perception continues to open. Reactions continue to soften, and understanding continues to replace struggle as the primary way of meeting experience. Personal perception quietly shapes the entire experience of life. Long before events are labeled good or bad, success or failure, perception interprets them and assigns meaning. This process happens so automatically that it often goes unnoticed, yet it determines emotional response, decision-making, and direction. When perception changes, life does not need to. The same circumstances can feel restrictive or liberating depending on how they are seen. Many people attempt to change their lives by altering external conditions, believing that fulfillment lies somewhere beyond the present moment. Yet, without a shift in perception, new circumstances quickly inherit old frustrations. Personal perception is the lens through which reality is filtered. If the lens remains unchanged, the view remains familiar, regardless of what appears in front of it. Recognizing this is itself a game changer because it returns power to awareness rather than circumstance. Perception is shaped by past experience, beliefs, and emotional memory. These influences are not wrong, but they are incomplete. When perception I is mistaken for truth, life becomes rigid. You react instead of respond. You interpret challenges as threats and uncertainty as danger. As perception softens, curiosity replaces defensiveness. You begin to see that events are not instructing you how to feel. They are simply happening. Faith plays a stabilizing role in this shift. Faith does not demand positive thinking or denial of difficulty. It offers trust that meaning can be found even when clarity is incomplete. When faith supports perception, you stop insisting that life meet certain conditions before you allow yourself to be present. You begin meeting life as it is, knowing that understanding evolves through engagement rather than avoidance. A change in perception alters the relationship with struggle. Instead of asking why something is happening to you, you ask what is being revealed through it. This does not minimize pain, but it prevents pain from becoming identity. You experience difficulty without allowing it to define who you are or what is possible. Perception creates space between experience and self-concept, and in that space, choice emerges. Personal perception as the ultimate game changer means recognizing that freedom begins internally. You may not control every situation, but you always